Hi there, I'm the Unscored Twig, and I like analysing game rules. The new PHP has cool feats, awesome spells, and some amazing class features, but today I want to talk about ropes, long sticks, and oil. Have you guys read the adventuring equipment table? There's some really useful stuff in there. I'd basically split it into 4 different categories, which I'm going to be covering in this video. Skill support, grappling combos, floor hazards, and attack replacement. This adventuring gear is often referred to as mundane equipment, but they really aren't, and neither are any of these guys. They're pretty exceptional because they support me on Patreon. They get my videos early and get audio-only versions even earlier than that. Of particular brilliance are SK and Mark Rainbow. I only found this out recently, but apparently when you're as cool as they are, you start to glow in the dark. Just imagine how useful that is. You'd never have to use a torch ever again. As always, I'm going to be starting with the more generic, obvious things, and then work up to the really interesting stuff at the end. So, let's get going with the things that everyone can make use of, the skill support equipment. As the name would suggest, these are items which make you better at skills. There are a few examples of these in the 2014 rules, such as the portable ram, which gave you +4 and advantage to break down a door. Well, now there's a bunch more. A lot of the old equipment that was really just there for flavour has now been updated to help you with skill checks. For example, if you're trying to make an intelligence check to identify a lich's phylactery, you can consult an accurate non-fiction book about black magic, and that gives you +5 to your roll. Importantly, you have to actually consult the book there and then. This same thing is true if you're using survival to try and find the lost silver temple, and you have a map. That's a flat +5 to your check. If you want to pass yourself off as a royal guard, wearing a costume now gives you an advantage on your checks. And if you want to make a jump, a 10-foot pole gives you advantage on your athletics roll, because you can vault with it. There's a bunch of items like these, and if you think that a particular piece of equipment would give you a boost to a skill check, it probably does. Except for the climber's kit. That just stops you from falling more than 25 feet. Let's move on to the more interesting stuff though. Grappling combos. There are 3 items that fit into this category: the rope, chain, and manacles, and they work in broadly the same way. Whenever a creature is grappled, restrained, or incapacitated, you can use a utilise action to tie them up, and they'll need to use an action and make a skill check to escape. I'll quickly point out that the target does not need to be grappled by you. If the monk has someone grappled, you can use fast hands as a thief to tie them up as a bonus action. So onto the actual equipment. We'll start with the manacles, which I think are probably the worst, although they are the hardest to escape. Manacles require a DC 13 sleight of hand check to apply, and give the target disadvantage on attack rolls, or the restrained condition if the manacles are fixed in place. They then require an action and a DC 20 sleight of hand check or a DC 25 athletics check to escape. Although if you have thieves tools, that sleight of hand check gets reduced down to 15. The issue with manacles is that grappled and restrained already give disadvantage to attack rolls, and incapacitated means that you can't make them at all. They just seem a bit too situational to me. What's not situational though is the rope. This thing is great. DC 10 sleight of hand to apply, and it just flat out restrains an enemy. Escaping is slightly easier though, with a DC 15 acrobatics or DC 20 athletics check, but it does still take up an action. The rope might actually be an automatic restraint with no check at all, but I think that binding someone probably includes tying a knot. Our last one is the chain, which is basically the big brother of the rope. It increases the acrobatics escape DC to 18. On the downside though, it does require a DC 13 athletics check to apply, which might be tougher for your rogue. Both the rope and the chain have no size restriction at all, so if your monk lands a stunning strike on a dragon, you can immediately tie it up. Now, is this worth doing? For the most part, I don't think that giving up your action to restrain someone is that good of a trade, and I also don't think that making a grappling character with a rope is that insanely strong. What this is great on though is the thief. In certain parties, grappled and incapacitated can come up a lot. Maybe there's a monk or a dance bard, or the Solok likes twinning Tash's hideous laughter. You can then run in and tie them up as a bonus action, giving a more consistent form of advantage. The rope and chain are really good teamwork tools. On a single character, they aren't worth doing, but with a party who are working together, they very much are. Right, quick side note, there's a lot of talk about advantage being cheap in 2024, but I'm finding that a huge amount of that is from the prone condition. Prone is really easy to break, all you have to do is stand up, and that means that you need to keep on applying it. It's also actively bad for anyone using either range or reach. Restrained is a much better form of advantage. With an action and a DC 15 skill check, it's also much more likely to last for multiple rounds. Next up, floor hazards. There are 4 of these, however the hunting trap is so niche that that's literally all I'm going to say about it. The remaining 3 are ball bearings, oil, and caltrops. Ball bearings are a utilise action to drop, and they cover a 10-foot square. Anyone who walks into that square needs to make a DC 10 dex save or fall prone. That's so low that I don't think they're especially useful. Oil might be a bit better. If you pour it onto the ground and light it, you basically get 1 square spike growth that always does 5 damage. It only lasts for 2 rounds, but you could maybe do something with that on a grappler build. The one that I'm excited about is caltrops. DC 15 dex save, or you take 1 piercing damage and your speed drops to 0. That's got some really good uses as a sort of disruption effect. Imagine that there's a group of orcs running at you, but there's this little passage to go back to the previous room in the dungeon. Retreat and drop some caltrops behind you, and the orcs will be filtered through, with some of them getting through the passage and some getting stuck. That means that you only have to fight half of them at once. Now, caltrops do only cover a 5-foot square. Pretty much anyone can easily jump over that. You kind of want a bit more coverage. So drop more caltrops. If everyone in the party retreats and drops a set of caltrops in this passage, that results in them being unavoidable, and also filters the orcs even better. Now you have some orcs who got stopped by the caltrops twice, some who got stopped only once, and some who got through completely unscathed. You've made the fight even easier. It's another piece of equipment that encourages teamwork rather than being good on an individual character. Okay, last bit. Attack replacement. There are a few items like the Acid, Alchemist Fire and the Net which can be thrown instead of making an attack with the attack action. These all require the target to make a dex save with a DC based on your dex. For the most part, I don't think that they're great. The Net is maybe okay, it's another way of restraining, but there's one that I really want to talk about. Let's have a look at oil. As well as pouring oil on the ground, you can throw it at someone, and it has a very different effect. If they fail the dex save, for the next minute, every time they take fire damage, they take 5 more fire damage. That doesn't appear to be a one-time thing. It's every time until it dries after a minute. So, how are we doing our fire damage? Well, maybe we're a monk and we have a torch. That does 1 fire damage, but since it's a simple melee weapon now, monk can use their martial arts dice instead. Technically the torch doesn't even have to be lit, but I think that I'm going to ignore that fact from here on out. Okay, I won't kid you, this is a bad idea. Monk gets a lot of their damage from flurry of blows, which has to be an unarmed strike. You can't use your torch for that. I kinda just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was cool. The more practical thing is to go with the Elements Monk, which gets to do fire damage with their unarmed strikes. That means that if you throw your oil with your first attack, you can get between 2 and 4 more attacks which do plus 5 damage each. That sounds really good. Let's actually do some damage calcs just to see how strong it is. For a baseline, here's the standard Elements Monk. I've taken Grappler of 4, plus 2 Dex at 8, and the Boon of Combat Prowess at 19, and I'm just attacking and using Flurry of Blows. I'm also assuming 60% to hit, and that the enemy has a 60% chance to fail its save against the grapple. Now if we add that plus 5 fire damage to every attack, it gets so much. Hang on, it's basically the same. When you throw your oil, you give up 1 attack to do something that only gives a 60% chance of increasing your damage. And since you can only use Grappler's Punch and Grab when you hit using the attack action, you're also less likely to get an advantage on your Flurry of Blows. If the plus 5 doubled on a crit, it would be way better, but as a flat number, it doesn't. On turn 2, the damage is quite a lot higher if you hit with your oil, since you're no longer giving up an attack. But if the enemy dies, then you need to apply your oil to your next target. Throwing oil as a monk is kind of just not really worth it. But once again, you aren't on your own. What if you also have a paladin in the party who can use Searing Strike to trigger 2 more hits of oil, and a Moon Druid who can use Primal Strike to get another hit of oil and maybe summon Elemental to get some more, and then you might also have a Wizard who can use Scorching Ray to get 3 more hits of oil. Once again, this is not something that you're doing on your own, it's a teamwork tactic. With the Rope, the Thief can team up with an ally to restrain as a bonus action. With the Caltrops, a party can make a tactical retreat together to split up their enemies. And with the oil, a party can create a debuff which everyone can exploit. This adventuring gear only helps if you all work together, and I think that's fantastic. More teamwork is always a good thing. Now, I do want to quickly address one thing with the oil. I've seen a fair few people saying that having it last for a full minute is silly. I don't normally do something like this, but please don't nerf oil to only doing it one time. That makes it essentially useless. If you want to copy the 2 round duration of the Dancing in Space effect, sure, that's probably fine. It's such a cool tech that only benefits you if you work together though, and I don't want that to die. Hope you enjoyed this. If you want more analyses of specific features like this, here's a video I made about some of my favourite spell changes. There's a lot of other pieces of adventuring equipment, I only covered the ones that I thought were most interesting. But if you want to know more about stuff like the bedroll, I found a really good new channel while researching for this called Game Easy Roll Good, and he has a video covering this entire chapter of the book. He's only got like 350 subscribers, so give him a shot. I think that my next video will be on unarmed strikes, which is a pretty huge topic honestly, so subscribe for that. Make sure that you share this with your party if you want to use any of these tactics so that everyone knows what's going on. Bye!